Yesterday, as Nigerian youths marked the first anniversary of the Endsars protest of October 2020, not much attention was paid to the fallout of the month-long dissent against police brutality. There was little or no acknowledgement of the 22 policemen who were brutally murdered during the Endsars protest last year, nor was a thought spared for their families and loved ones still mourning the death of their husbands, fathers, brothers, and sons. There was no reference even to the 112 men and women of the Nigerian Police Force who sustained injuries and the scores of police stations and formations that were vandalized. Nor was there much introspection on the homes and businesses of innocent Nigerians nationwide whose properties were looted and destroyed during the protest and in the aftermath of the Lekki tollgate shooting. Scant mention also, if any, was made of the losses incurred by government institutions and media organizations such as the Lagos State Government, the Nigerian Ports Authority, TVC News, and others, to vandals and looters that took advantage of the protests. Well, here to discuss the alternative narrative on the Endsars protest, we're now being joined from Abuja by Senator Victor Udoma-Egba, a senior advocate of Nigeria, a member of the ruling All Progressives Congress, and former chairman of the Niger Delta Development Commission. Senator Udoma-Egba, who was also once the Senate Majority Leader, was one of many Nigerians whose homes in Cross River State was looted and set ablaze by vandals in the heat of the Endsars protest last year. Good morning, Senator Udoma-Egba, and thank you for joining us on the morning show.
Thank you, Dr. Ruben Abati. Thank you, Rufai and Tudu.
Morning, sir.
And thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much for honoring our invitation. Yesterday, 1 year after the Endsars protest last year. Now, what do you remember? What's your take on what happened yesterday, the commemoration of the anniversary of Endsars? And do you think that the federal government of Nigeria or the various state governments that set up judicial panels of inquiry have been able to do justice and to allay the fears of the populace?
Well, how time flies. It's 1 year already. I remember I was out of the country, but I was watching the attack on my house live. Somebody had the presence of mind to live stream it. So I was watching the mob as they moved towards my house. And you can imagine the feeling of that violation, you know, of the house that had taken me, my wife and I, 18 full years to build. We started building the house in 1991 and managed to move in January of 2009. And it housed everything that you can imagine: heirlooms, out-of-print books, manuscripts, newspaper columns, and everything. You know, everything was completely looted. The only thing that was left was the floor. Even the toilet seats were carted away, and they came well prepared with every tool and equipment that was necessary for the exercise. It was well coordinated, it was premeditated. The water pumps were removed from the borehole, the overhead tanks were drained and brought down, the chandeliers, the appropriate tools were used. You know, so it was premeditated and very well coordinated. Now, this certainly couldn't have been part of the intention of the promoters of the Endsars protests. So clearly, at a point, I think the protests were infiltrated, and hoodlums just took over to settle all manner of scores.
What happened, and we watched those scenes as well, what happened in your home was completely disgusting. But first, I want to know, you made an appeal for the return of your father's robes. Were they ever returned?
They were not. Oh. And for me, the robes were perhaps the only things or the mementos or reminders of my father that would have made meaning to me, because I was his first child who became a lawyer. He was a judge, and then later on a justice of the Court of Appeal. And being the first child of his who became a lawyer, naturally when he passed on, those robes were handed over to me. You know, it's not the only thing that was lost. I mean, heirlooms, drinks from my maternal grandmother's marriage. My mother died last year at the age of 92. So if her mother got married at the age of 16, some of those drinks were 108 years old. And then out-of-print books. I used to belong to the Folio Society that dealt with out-of-print books. So I had a very huge collection, a very rich collection, and everything was lost. My father's practice books were lost. I've been a lawyer for 43 years now, so you can imagine how old my father's practice books were. Elephant tusks from my grandparents, maternal and paternal, everything gone. So right now, as we speak, I have nothing to show of my father, as it were.
So sad about your loss, so very sad, and it shouldn't have happened in the first place. You said, obviously, this is not what the protesters initially intended, but the hoodlums came and hijacked. Could it be political, whatever it is? The question is, have we really learned from all of these incidents? When you see what happened yesterday, because police brutality started this.
Well, police brutality started it, but at a point it became a metaphor for bad governance, for failed expectations, for missed turns, and for everything we have lost as a nation. Yesterday, I was talking with a friend of mine who recently assumed his office as ambassador in one of the Southeast Asian countries, and I was saying, oh, look, Your Excellency, I think I will make time to visit you. He said, well, if you want to come to annoy yourself about the possibilities we had as a country, and we missed, that what these people have achieved in 40 years is incredible. So I understand the anger of the youths. Coming from my generation, where your choice of university was first local. It was only if you couldn't get a place in a local university that you thought of going abroad. Where from a generation that saw the king of Saudi Arabia come to University College Ibadan for his medical checkup. From a generation where there was a surfeit of hope to a point of hopelessness. From a generation where at some point money wasn't our problem, but how to spend it. You can imagine, you can understand the anger of these young men and young women.
Well, Senator Udoma-Egba, you referred to your wife a few minutes ago. You know how it took the two of you 18 years to build that house that was attacked. Well, our condolences, because we understand that.
Thank you, Rufai. Thank you, Dr. Bati.
Yes, but going forward, with regard to this Endsars protest, some people argue that the police, signposted as the villains in the entire drama, that they also, had losses. Many of them were killed, police stations were razed down, and all of this pointing to this lack of trust between government and the people, and the younger generation taking all the matter and going to the streets to protest. 1 year later, they are still at it. As someone who has been involved in public service at various levels, what do we think we need to do, really, going forward, to reduce tension in this country?
You know, I did my youth corps in the old Bauchi state under the police. He became my colleague in the Senate, Senator Nuhu Aliyu. And I remember when we were offered accommodation in the police barracks, and there was an alternative outside the police barracks, he advised me to take the one outside the police barracks. And that was because the police barracks, even at that time, was so dilapidated, so unkempt. Now, so the police has been also a victim of the misgovernance, of the missed opportunities, of the missed turns. They are as much victims of this as every other Nigerian. You know, so I think for me what needs to be done there must be this consensus, this national conversation around where we should go as a nation. Can we continue to retrogress, while the rest of the world is moving forward? I mean, Vietnam until recently and Thailand until recently were at war. A few years later, see where they are. Not to talk of South Korea, not to talk of Dubai. The first primary school in Abu Dhabi was in 1969. The first graduate from my village was in 1953. So today, you can't even, like we say, you can't see their back. You know, so there must be a conscious national conversation that our politics must be directly tied to development. You know, and then let us downplay these issues of religion and ethnicity. They have never taken anybody anywhere.
But even as you say that, there were reports within the APC that you had to be made a chairman of a zoning committee to microzone certain positions during the APC Congress because of, you know, concerns about marginalization. Ethnicity continues to play a big role in Nigerian politics. How do we actually move beyond that? We all acknowledge that we must, but how is that going to happen?
You know, in 2018, I spent most of 2018 in Abu Dhabi. And 2018 was declared the year of tolerance. And everywhere you went to, you saw signs proclaiming tolerance, you know. And in Abu Dhabi, you dare not raise religiously sensitive issues. You dare not, because their focus is development. Their focus is inclusiveness. Their focus is making everywhere conducive for everybody else, you know. So, and I think that the issue of ethnicity and religion is an elite thing. It's the elites just use it to divide the people. The security men in my home are not from my part of the world. They don't share my faith. My driver has been my driver for 32 years. He's from the north. He's a Muslim. But he's as much a member of my family as my own children. You know, so it is a decision, a conscious decision we must all take to tie our politics to development. Everywhere else, they say economics determines the politics. It is only in Nigeria that I see politics determining our economics. So it's like the tail wagging the dog in Nigeria in our politics.
I mean, you made a stark comparison between nations that left us behind. You know, you talked about Abu Dhabi, even maybe by extension, let's talk about Dubai. There was a fishing village up till 91, and now we've seen all they have done. But the problem a lot of people say, and I'll come back to you, sir, is that it's you, the politicians. It's you people that mess things up in the end. That's what they always say. And that's why a lot of people are saying 2023 will not be any different. What do you say about that? They're putting the blame at your doorsteps. You, the politicians.
Rufai, the observation is valid, but I want to say, yes, politicians are complicit, but you know Nigerian politicians are in two hues. You have those in uniform and those out of uniform. Now, if you take countries that were at par with us in 1960, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brazil, India, were considered at par. 3 years back, I gave a lecture somewhere in Beijing. And when I mentioned these countries, chief executive of a Chinese company who has been in Nigeria for a while, added that China was further down. Now, what is it that we did that they also did? You know, we experienced several episodes of military rule. Brazil had the same experience. Indonesia had the same experience. So you cannot totally implicate military rule as the reason for a lack of progress. But what is it that we did that they did not do? Singapore is a city-state. It still remains a city-state. You go to Malaysia, the federating units have remained the same since 1960. You go to Brazil, I think since 1960, they probably have created just one new state. India, the provinces are still the same. Indonesia, the federating units have remained the same. We had 3 regions in 1960. By 1963, you had 4 regions. By 1967, you had 12 states. By 1996, that is 36 years later, you had 36 states, which means we were creating an average of 1 state every year. Why is this important? It is important when you relate it to the ratio between our capital budget and recurrent budget. In 1960, it was single digit. By 1967, it was like 60 for capital, 40 for recurrent. Today, we have 20-something% for capital, and the rest of it, 70-something% for recurrent. So the solution is not just with the politicians, whether they are the ones in Agbada or the ones in uniform. The solution is by Nigerians who must agree that the structure that we have today has taken us nowhere, and we're in a cul-de-sac. It will take us nowhere. Even if you reform the police and the rest of the country remains the way it is, Rufai, the reforms will be to no avail. They will just be symbolic.
Well, Senator Udoma-Egba, let's talk about local politics. Well, correct me if I'm right. You left the PDP in part because of differences between you and the governor, Professor Ben Ayade, governor of Cross River State. And now you are back, you are in the same party with the same Professor Ben Ayade, who moved from the PDP to the APC. So both of you are in the same party. So how is politics in that regard? How comfortable are you that the two of you, a former adversary, is now in the same ship with you? How are you guys managing that? And then quickly, what are your next plans as a politician? Or have you chosen to just stay aloof for now?
Well, let me start with the last question. I'm still very active in politics. I am still available. I made a commitment to public service a long time ago, and I still hold myself committed to public service. Now, just a point of correction. I did not leave PDP. I was evicted from the PDP by the then governor. The governor was not Senator Ben Ayade. The governor at the time was Senator Leah Limoke. And I was evicted from the PDP. I was Senate leader at the time. I had been deputy Senate leader before, and at the time of eviction, I was Senate leader. And we had a number of issues that I believe, as a Senate leader, you are chairman of the National Assembly caucus of the party. And I did not get any protection when I was being thrown out of the window. But because I was sure that only 2 people can determine my future, that is God and myself, I now decided to take my chances with the APC because I'm still politically active. Where I come from, those who speak my dialect are 14,000, both at home and in the diaspora. So for me to have risen to this point by the grace of God, I must remain available to speak for them. So I remain politically active, and Senator Ben Ayade, incidentally, was in the Senate at the time all of this was happening, and I was his leader, and he was quite empathetic. He was quite sympathetic that I was going through the needless crisis, the needless pains from people that I had worked with. But I was thrown out, and I had no protection from anywhere, from the party, from the presidency, from anybody. So I had to take my destiny in my hands and move on.
So you don't have any issues with Professor Ben Ayade? The two of you are very good friends in the APC.
No, I don't have any issues with Professor Ben Ayade.
Okay, that clarification is useful.
Right, I want to take you back to the issue of ethnicity vis-a-vis development. One of the issues right now in this country is our lack of national cohesion, which leads to people feeling marginalized, and we've all seen how those feelings can be expressed in the most negative ways. And it's been posited by several people that in order to foster a feeling of unity in the country, the presidency needs to move from the north to south. I'm sure most people feel that we should be beyond that by now, but these are the realities on ground. Where do you stand on that issue?
Well, my head is with the notion that who leads this country is not a matter of geography. It's a matter of competence. It's a matter of experience. It's a matter of vision. You know, but my heart is with those who believe that the presidency should rotate. Now, I was listening to the former Emir of Kano the other day, His Royal Highness, His Royal Majesty Sanusi Lamido Sanusi. I don't think where you come from has anything to do with your competence. But unfortunately, we are stuck. We are stuck in that past of turn-by-turn politics, you know. But for me, I am hoping and believing that a day will come, like we did in the days of MKO Abiola, when Nigerians will just look at the individual and will not see religion or ethnicity the prism that they used to look at the Nigerian. It happened before with MKO Abiola and Babagana Kingibe. It means that it's a reality that can happen a second time.
All right. I'd like to ask you two things. Number one will be your take on this conversation. Will be your take on this conversation on restructuring. The APC said, we want to restructure. They put out a committee for it, but they reneged on it. And a lot of people are saying that's what is causing most of the agitation in the country today. That's one. Two, you talk about development. We want to be like Singapore and the rest. A vital chance of development was handed over to the Niger Delta region in the NDDC, which you are the chairman of. What happened to the NDDC?
Former chairman.
Former chairman of. What happened to the NDDC? What happened?
You know, I was announced as chairman. My board was announced in July of 2017, but we were not inaugurated until November of 2017. And in between, we kept ourselves busy by holding a number of retreats and brainstorming sessions on the way forward for NDDC. And I remember Dr. Joaba, the then Director General of Bureau for Public Service Reforms. He came to speak to us. And his opening sentence was, everything that can possibly go wrong with an organization has gone wrong with the NDDC. Now, for want of time, I can just summarize quickly the problems of the NDDC as I see it. The first is that there is a law establishing the NDDC, and that law has never been complied with. That law has been observed more in breach than in compliance. And I give you an example. For how many years now, NDDC has had no board. The law does not contemplate or envisage a minute of NDDC being without a board. But it's been without a board for almost 2 years. And the story they tell us is that because of one magical forensic audit, you cannot have a board. If you check the act establishing NDDC, I think section 18, it is the board that has the power to audit the accounts of NDDC. There is no board of NDDC that has served out its term because of political interference. But more fundamentally, Rufai, you can't build a house in your village without having a survey plan for the land to determine the size of your land, and then having a building plan for the building you want to set up. NDDC had a well-thought-out master plan that was launched with fanfare by President Olusegun Obasanjo in 2006. It was a stakeholder-generated plan. It was homegrown. The state governments were involved. All the stakeholders, the oil companies were involved. But the plan was abandoned almost immediately. So today, you are trying to develop a whole region without a plan. Now, if you look at the mandate of the NDDC, it comes in about 10 or 12 subsections, but I usually summarize it into one sentence. The whole essence of the NDDC was to create an integrated, developed economy for the Niger Delta region. What do you have today? The NDDC is building classroom blocks, responsibilities of local governments or state governments, competing with local governments and state governments. So there is no plan to integrate the region. So and then when I came in, the starting point for me was, of course, to come up with a new plan. And when the process, when I heard over the news, just one sentence on the television that the board of NDDC has been dissolved. Nobody told me there were any issues, but that is beside the point. But the point I'm making is that the law setting up NDDC has never been complied with. Never. There is no master plan. And then thirdly, if you look at the systems, the processes in NDDC, for you to get a payment of 1,000 naira, you need to 62 or 63 stops. Now, when you have stops like that, it just breeds inefficiency, and the consequence of inefficiency is corruption. You know. So today, the NDDC has no board. It has, I don't know what you call him, an acting managing director or a sole administrator, a contraption that was not contemplated by the law. And the surprise is that the member states of the NDDC are just looking in surprise.
Well, Senator, we have just a few minutes to go, but very quickly, let's talk about the All Progressives Congress, your party. Controversies about the legality, constitutionality of the APC Caretaker Committee, led particularly by the governor of Yobe State, Mai Mala Buni. Your thoughts on that as you know, a lawyer? And then what do you think of the congresses that took place just over the weekend within the party, and reports of divisions and attempts by Abuja to impose people across wards and, you know, within the party?
Well, I think that the party itself has settled the issue of the legality of the Governor Buni-led interim administration of the party. So I will say no more on that, and I will plead with you not to push the issue anymore. But on the issue of the congresses, let me say this. Congresses are a process. They are part of a process that leads up to elections. And both the Constitution and the Electoral Act prefer the frameworks, they prefer milestones, they prefer timelines for all of those processes. Now, for the congresses, first, you must publish a date for the congresses. You must publish a venue for the congresses. INEC must be informed of the date and time of the congresses, and then the party at the national level will send a panel to conduct the congresses. So for you to determine which congress is valid and which is not, was it witnessed by, or was it conducted by a panel set up by the national headquarters of the party? Was INEC there? Was the venue published? Was the date published? So I know that there are what we call parallel congresses, but any of those congresses that does not meet all these requirements is just a political gimmick.
Well, Tundo, you still have a question for the senator?
Well, just about the APC congresses and what does that portend? Obviously, some states went smoothly, like your state, but a lot of states there was actual violence. And what happens now? How do you now harmonize two different sets of state ESCOs, which have emerged in a lot of states?
In Cross River State, surprisingly, because everything was very peaceful, but surprisingly, we saw later that day another list of so-called ESCO members. And I called one of them, and I said, where did this year Congress take place? He couldn't say where it took place. I said, was INEC there? He couldn't say. Where are you? He said he was in Lagos. He was in Lagos on the day of Congress, and he was elected. You know, so politicians are given to all sorts of tricks and gimmicks. So at the end of the day, everybody knows which Congress is valid. All the other so-called congresses are gimmicks to enable them negotiate for other things. But as for the validity of the congresses, I have no doubt that there will be the congresses that were organized by panels or committees from the headquarters of the party, congresses witnessed by INEC, congresses for which the venues and the dates were long published.
Question before on restructuring. APC set up a committee for restructuring. Nothing has been done as regards that. A lot of people say that's the reason for the problem. People want this country to be restructured.
You know, if you look at the provisions relating to amendments of the Constitution, because you cannot restructure without constitutional amendment. You cannot achieve any amendment to the Constitution without building a national conversation around specific issues and reaching a national consensus on those issues. Now, the process of building that conversation and building that consensus is outside the constitutional responsibility of the National Assembly. In other words, for you to amend the Constitution or even restructure, you have to go beyond the Constitution, beyond the National Assembly. It has to be a national project, you know, for which the media, civil society organizations, the presidency, the National Assembly, everybody has to be involved, because you have to build, that conversation, you have to generate the conversation, and then also build a consensus around those issues before the proposed amendments can even pass, given the current, the extant provisions of the Constitution as they stand. You know, so the issue of restructuring has to go beyond the political party. It has to be a pan-national issue, you know. So it involves all of us, including Rufai, including Tundun, Dr. Abati, and Victor Udoma-Egba.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Victor Udoma-Egba, for joining us this morning on The Morning Show. Thank you very much indeed.